I opened the front door, expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor dropping by. Instead, I saw a woman standing there with two oversized suitcases, a smug smile on her face, and an air of confidence that made my stomach turn. Behind her, my husband stood awkwardly, shifting from one foot to the other, looking anywhere but at me. "You must be kidding," I said, gripping the door handle tighter. She didn't even blink. "Oh, he didn't tell you?" Her voice was sickeningly sweet, like someone pretending to be polite, but enjoying every second of the discomfort she was causing. "I'm moving in." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The world around me seemed to freeze, my brain struggling to process what she had just said. I turned to my husband, my voice quieter this time. "What is she talking about, Eric?" He cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, babe. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how to bring it up." Bring it up? He didn't know how to tell his wife that his new girlfriend was planning to move into our home? My head felt light, my heart pounding in my ears. I stared at him, waiting for some kind of punchline, some ridiculous explanation that would make sense of this insanity. But there was nothing, just silence and the slight smirk on the other woman's face. She sighed dramatically. "Look, we all knew this was coming. You and Eric have been having problems, right? He and I just connected. It happens." She shrugged, as if stealing another woman's husband was just an unfortunate accident. "But I don't want this to be awkward. I think it would be best if we all just got along." She thought we could just get along? Like we were roommates instead of the wife and mistress of the same man? My fingers curled into fists, but I took a slow, deep breath. Losing my temper wouldn't change the situation. I needed to be smart. "Is that so?" I asked, my voice calm, though my insides burned. Eric finally spoke again, stepping closer. "Listen, I know this is a shock, but things haven't been great between us for a while. I didn't want to hurt you, but I've moved on, and I think, for everyone's sake, we should try to make this work." Make this work? He had lost his mind. The woman, his girlfriend, tilted her head, pretending to be sympathetic. "I don't want to cause problems, but honestly, we both know this house is too big for just one person." She was acting like she was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful she was willing to share my own home with me. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. But I smiled. "You know what?" I said, stepping aside. "Come in." The girlfriend's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Even Eric looked taken aback. But I simply gestured towards the living room, pretending as if I had no problem with this absurd situation. "Really?" she asked, hesitating. "Of course," I said smoothly. "You want to move in? By all means, make yourself comfortable." She beamed, dragging her suitcase inside like she had just won some prize. Eric followed, still wary, but visibly relieved that I wasn't making a scene. I shut the door behind them, locking it with a quiet click. They thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming next. The sound of the front door closing behind us felt oddly final, as if everything had changed in an instant. The girlfriend, her name was Rachel by the way, sank down on the couch, stretching her legs out as if she were in her own home. Eric stood awkwardly by the door, unsure of what to do next, his eyes flickering between Rachel and me. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough to make him apologize, let alone take responsibility for what he had just done. I forced a smile and gestured to the kitchen. "Would you like something to drink, Rachel? Maybe some tea?" I wanted to keep the tension from building. The last thing I needed was for my blood pressure to spike right now. Rachel's smile was bright, but there was a hint of something sharper underneath. "Oh, that would be lovely, thank you." She stood up, adjusting her bag, clearly feeling at home already. "Eric says you're a great cook, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got." It felt like a slap in the face. She was already acting like this was her house. I nodded, keeping my voice steady as I moved toward the kitchen. Sure, I'll make something. I'm sure you'll love it. As I went to prepare the tea, I could feel their eyes on me, both of them silently watching, wondering how I would react. They were probably expecting me to break down in tears or start yelling, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I was smarter than that. I grabbed my phone from the counter, casually texting a few friends who had been through similar situations. Hey, need some advice? My husband's new girlfriend just moved in. What should I do? I didn't expect answers right away, but I knew there was a plan forming in my mind. While I waited for responses, I walked back to the living room with a tray of tea and some snacks, placing them carefully in front of Rachel. She flashed me another smile, as if she had just won. I'm sure this will be a great new chapter for all of us, she said, almost too sweetly. You know, Eric has told me so much about how you two have grown apart. But it's nice that we can all move forward. I bit my tongue to stop from laughing out loud. Yes, moving forward, I said softly. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I could tell she didn't quite understand the meaning behind my words. She probably thought I was agreeing with her, but what I really meant was something else entirely. I was already planning my next move. Eric shifted nervously beside her. I think we should talk about everything, he started, but I cut him off. No need, I said, smiling as I poured myself a cup of tea. We'll have plenty of time to talk later. The quiet tension in the room was palpable. Rachel seemed a little confused, but I could tell she was enjoying the drama. I couldn't help but smile inwardly. They had underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. Eric's face fell slightly as he realized I wasn't going to make this easy for him. And Rachel? Well, she had no idea what she had just walked into. The next few hours felt like they were moving in slow motion. I made small talk, keeping things polite, but every word that left my mouth was carefully measured. I couldn't let my guard down. Eric and Rachel were settling in, as though this were perfectly normal. Eric kept offering uncomfortable glances, trying to make sure I wasn't too upset, but he was still too wrapped up in his own guilt to really face me. I went upstairs after a while, pretending I needed to freshen up. My mind was racing, trying to piece together everything that had happened. Rachel's sudden confidence, Eric's lame excuses, and the sickening realization that they both thought I would just roll over and let them take over my life. I wasn't the kind of woman who just let things happen. Not anymore. As I entered the bathroom, I closed the door behind me, locking it, and pulled out my phone. I texted my lawyer, just a quick message to let him know what was happening. I need help with something. I think it's time to move forward. Let me know when you're free for a call. I didn't have all the details figured out yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Rachel wasn't moving in without consequences. I spent a few minutes gathering my thoughts. I wasn't going to make this a scene. I wasn't going to yell or beg Eric to come to his senses. No. I had learned over the years that people like Eric only understood one thing: consequences, and I was about to make sure he felt them. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, I acted as if nothing was wrong. Rachel and Eric were chatting, making plans about their new life together, and my stomach churned. But I forced myself to smile and walked into the room, sitting down calmly. Eric, I've been thinking, I said, my voice light but firm. This situation isn't exactly what I was expecting, but you're right. It's time for all of us to move forward. He looked relieved, probably thinking I was finally accepting the situation. Rachel, on the other hand, beamed, obviously pleased that I wasn't making a fuss, but I could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe she was starting to wonder what I was up to. I'm glad you understand, Eric said, his voice soft. He was clearly waiting for some kind of reconciliation, some sign that everything was going to be fine. He had no idea what I was planning. I smiled. but there was something colder in my eyes now. Of course, but moving forward means that I'll need to take care of a few things. You know, just to make sure we're all in the right place. Rachel's smile faltered slightly. She opened her mouth to say something, but I quickly interrupted. I'll be right back. Just need to make a quick call. I stood and walked toward the kitchen, knowing they were both watching me. I could feel their eyes following my every move. The phone call I needed to make was simple. Hey, it's me, I said when the lawyer picked up. I need you to draw up some papers for me. Something about property rights. And I need to know what I can do about someone trying to move into my house without my permission. As I talked, I could hear Rachel's laughter in the background, echoing faintly from the living room. It only made my resolve stronger. She had no idea what she was about to lose. When I hung up, I went back into the living room. Eric and Rachel were still talking, but now I could see the unease creeping into their expressions. Something about the way I had spoken on the phone made them uneasy. They had no idea what was coming. Everything's in motion now, I said, with a calmness that surprised even me. You two should get comfortable, though it might not be as long-term as you think? Eric's eyes widened. What do you mean? Oh, you'll see, I replied, my smile a little colder now. It's all about timing. Rachel glanced at Eric, confused, but I could tell she was starting to feel the shift in the atmosphere. They weren't the ones in control anymore. The following morning, I kept the same calm demeanor, but I could feel the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. The house felt different now, as though it no longer belonged to just me. Every step I took in the kitchen, every glance I shared with Eric or Rachel, was underlined by an invisible tension. But I wasn't going to let it break me. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me sweat. Eric was trying too hard to act normal. He was making breakfast, playing the part of the loving husband. Except there was no love left in our marriage. His hand shook slightly as he handed me a coffee mug, but he didn't meet my eyes. Rachel, sitting at the kitchen table, was chatting away about her plans, talking as if everything were perfectly fine. It was like I wasn't even there. I decided it was time to up the stakes. I wasn't going to sit around and watch them turn my home into their playground. Eric, I said, my voice soft but direct. I need to talk to you about something. Rachel didn't stop talking, clearly under the impression that I had just something trivial to discuss. But Eric knew better. His face stiffened, and he quickly wiped his hands on a towel. What's wrong? He asked, suddenly paying attention. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, making sure my words hit exactly where I needed them to. I've spoken to a lawyer. You're going to need to find somewhere else to stay. And Rachel too. I can't have this happening under my roof. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Rachel looked at me, her smile faltering, confusion spreading across her face. Eric blinked, as if my words hadn't fully registered. You... what? Eric stammered, the color draining from his face. You heard me, I replied, calm but firm. You're both leaving. The shock on their faces was priceless. Rachel tried to laugh it off, but there was a nervousness creeping into her voice. Come on, Christina. We were just getting started. Don't be dramatic. I could see that she still hadn't fully understood what was happening. Maybe she thought I was just being emotional, that I would change my mind. But that was the problem. Rachel didn't know me. Eric was no better. His voice was shaky now. Christina, you can't be serious. This is our home now. I've moved on. And that's your problem. I cut in, my words sharp. You don't respect what this home was, what it meant to us before. You never cared. But you're not moving in here with her. Eric opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, stopping him before he could speak. I've already made arrangements, I said. The lawyer's drawing up the paperwork, and by tomorrow this place will be under my sole name. You don't have the right to stay here anymore. Rachel's smug expression faltered, and for the first time since she'd walked in the door, I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. She wasn't so confident anymore. Eric turned pale, his mind clearly racing, trying to figure out how he could possibly get out of this. But I'm still married to you. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house too. Not anymore, I said, my voice cold. You've chosen her over me. You've made your bed. Now lie in it. But not in my house. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating even. I stood there, watching as the realization dawned on them both. They weren't going to get away with this. Not on my watch. I stepped forward, my confidence growing as I saw their anxiety build. You'll have to figure out somewhere else to go because I'm done being your backup plan. I won't be the woman left to pick up the pieces while you both play house. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but Eric quickly stood up, shaking his head. He looked at her, then back at me, his face betraying the panic now bubbling under the surface. We'll leave, he muttered. But this isn't over, Christina. I met his gaze, my voice calm and steady. It is for me. As they turned to gather their things, I felt a strange sense of power that I hadn't felt in years. This was my house, my life, and they had just tried to take it from me. But I wasn't going to let them. Not now. Not ever. And as they packed their bags and left, I made one final call. I didn't need to explain it to them. I had made my choice. And now, they would face the consequences of trying to ruin my life. By the time the door closed behind them, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't going to sit back and let them think they could just walk away unscathed, especially after everything they had put me through. I had spent years trying to make the marriage work, giving Eric the benefit of the doubt, but now he had chosen her. That was something I couldn't and wouldn't overlook. The house felt eerily quiet, but the silence was a relief. It was finally just me again, and I had no intention of letting them ruin my life any further. I sat down at the kitchen table, my phone in my hand, my fingers flying across the screen as I called my lawyer once more. Hey, it's me again, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need everything ready. I want this to move quickly. I'm filing for separation and asking for full ownership of the house. I could hear the surprise in his voice, but he didn't hesitate. I understand. We'll move forward with that right away, and we'll make sure Eric knows this isn't just about the house. Good, I replied, my voice firm. I've already had enough of his excuses. It's time he faces the consequences. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, taking a moment to breathe. I could almost hear Eric's voice in my head, pleading for forgiveness, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. It was only then that I remembered Rachel. I hadn't given her much thought after she left, but now I couldn't help but wonder, what would she do next? She had thought she was moving in, playing the role of the new woman who had taken my place, but she hadn't realized how little she really knew about me. The phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a text message from one of my friends. Heard about what happened. Are you okay? I couldn't help but smile at the support I was getting. I quickly typed back, I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. It's time to take control. I had spent so much time trying to fix things for Eric, for us. But now it was time to focus on myself, to rebuild, to thrive, and to move forward without any more toxic baggage. Later that evening, I made a few more calls, setting things in motion for the next step. I wasn't going to just get rid of Eric and Rachel. I was going to take back everything they had tried to take from me. This house was mine, and the life I was going to build from here on out would be mine too. I made sure to gather all the important documents from the house, receipts, property papers, everything that proved my ownership of this place. I even found the emails Eric had sent, planning his new life with Rachel, all while I was still married to him. It was all there, clear as day. And soon, they would know that I wasn't just a woman scorned. I was a woman in control. The next day, I got a call from the lawyer. Christina, I've got everything ready. We're moving forward with the separation papers, and I've already filed the paperwork for full ownership of the house. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything start to settle in. This was happening. They were going to feel the consequences, and I was going to make sure they never underestimated me again. I could only imagine what Rachel was thinking now. Did she still believe she was going to walk into my life without any consequences? Did she think Eric would be her knight in shining armor? I couldn't wait for the look on their faces when they realized that nothing would be as easy as they thought. The days that followed felt like a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet moments where I could finally breathe. I had my lawyer working on the separation agreement, making sure everything was in my favor. I didn't want to waste any time. This wasn't just about the house. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. I had learned a lot over the years with Eric, mostly that he would do whatever it took to get what he wanted. And Rachel? She had no idea what she was walking into. She probably thought she had won, that she had taken everything from me, but she had no clue what was coming. Eric didn't reach out at first. I didn't expect him to. I knew he was too busy trying to clean up the mess he'd made with Rachel, but the silence wasn't enough to make me doubt my decision. I was done with him. The Eric I had once known, the man I had married, had disappeared the moment he chose her over me. Then, on the fourth day after everything had gone down, I received a message from him. It was short, but the tone was clear. Christina, we need to talk. I made a mistake. I stared at the screen for a moment, trying to suppress the anger rising inside me. A mistake? Was that what this had been? A mistake? He didn't even have the decency to admit what he had really done. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a few minutes to collect myself, to remind myself why I was doing this. I wasn't going to fall into the same trap. I wasn't going to let him come back and sweep me off my feet with a few empty words. But the truth was, I was curious. I couldn't help but wonder what he wanted to say. Was he feeling guilty now that Rachel was no longer the shiny new thing? Was he starting to realize that he had lost everything because of his greed and selfishness? I decided to reply, but I kept it brief. We have nothing to discuss, Eric. There was a long pause before he responded. It was almost as if he couldn't believe how cold I had become. His message came in with a sense of urgency. Please, Christina, just give me a chance to explain. I know I messed up, but this isn't how I want it to end. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. This isn't how you want it to end? I set my phone down and walked to the window, staring out at the yard. I remembered the times when I had wanted nothing more than to make our marriage work, when I had tried so hard to keep things together, even when I knew deep down it wasn't right. But now, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been holding on to a ghost. Eric wasn't the man I had married anymore. And Rachel? She was just a player in his selfish game. They thought they could tear me down, destroy everything I had worked for, but all they had really done was show me exactly who they were. I picked up my phone again and typed a final response. This is over. Don't contact me again. I hit send without a second thought. There was no need for any more words. The truth had already been spoken, and there was nothing left for me to say. But as I sent the message, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long while, I was finally free. I didn't need their approval, their apologies, or their excuses. I had taken control, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest. The next few days were quiet, but the sense of calm in my home was almost comforting. I wasn't rushing to fill the silence with anything or anyone. I was just existing, focusing on the future, and rebuilding everything that had been shattered. And while Eric and Rachel continued to spin their web of lies and regret, I had already moved on. The best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about succeeding without them. It wasn't long before I started getting calls from old friends, colleagues, even clients who had heard about the situation. They were surprised, but they were also incredibly supportive. Some even mentioned that they had always seen the potential in me, potential I had been too afraid to tap into while tied down by a toxic marriage. I didn't need them to understand. All I needed was me. And as the phone rang again, this time from a potential new client, I smiled. The future was wide open, and this time, I was going to make sure I did it on my own terms. The weeks that followed felt like a slow, steady march toward a future I had only dreamed of before. I was on my own, no longer tied to Eric or Rachel's mess, and that freedom was something I hadn't truly appreciated until now. My life, for the first time in years, felt like mine again. I threw myself into work, focused on my clients, and even started planning for the future in ways I hadn't dared to before. Of course, Eric didn't let it go easily. He still reached out, tried to explain himself, and even begged me to reconsider. But his messages grew more desperate as time passed, and the sting of his betrayal started to wear off. There was no reason to engage anymore. I had made my decision, and it was final. One afternoon, about a month after the separation, I received a message from my lawyer. They had completed the final paperwork for the house and were moving forward with the legal separation. Eric had agreed to the terms. He was too broke and too embarrassed to fight it anymore. The once charming man who had promised me everything was now a shadow of his former self, and it felt good to see him finally face the consequences of his actions. But the best part? I hadn't just reclaimed my home. I had reclaimed my confidence, my self-worth, and my own life. I didn't need him or Rachel to make me feel whole. They had only been a distraction, a detour from what I was truly capable of. One night, while I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, I received a call. The familiar name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. It was a number I hadn't expected to see again. It was from my former boss, the one who had always seen the potential in me, even when I didn't. "Christina," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. "I've been following your progress, and I've got something I think you'll be interested in. We're expanding, and we need someone who knows the ropes, someone who can lead. Are you ready for the next big step?" I sat there for a moment, letting his words sink in. It was an offer I had dreamed about, a chance to finally step into the spotlight and take control of my career in ways I hadn't been able to before. "Absolutely," I said, my voice steady and sure. "I'm ready." And just like that, everything started to fall into place. The painful months of betrayal and heartbreak had finally led to this moment, where I was stronger, wiser, and ready to take on the world. I didn't need to look back anymore. The future was mine to shape, and nothing, not even Eric or Rachel, could take that away from me. The day I signed the contract for the new position was one of the happiest of my life. As I walked out of the office, the weight of everything that had happened slowly began to fade into the background. I had come out of the storm stronger than ever, and the future was bright, full of new possibilities. But there was one more thing I had to do. It wasn't just about getting ahead in my career or finding my independence again. It was about moving on from the past. I decided to visit the house, the one I had shared with Eric. It was no longer mine in the way it had been before, but there was something powerful about walking through the rooms again. The space felt different now, lighter, as if the air had been cleared of all the toxic memories. I didn't need to burn any bridges. I didn't need to get even. What I needed was closure, and this visit gave me that. I walked through the rooms, remembering the good times, the moments when I believed things could work. But I also remembered the way it all fell apart, how they both had tried to take everything from me. As I stood in the living room, I realized that I had already moved on. I was no longer the woman who had been devastated by betrayal. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who had learned. Eric and Rachel were nothing but a chapter in my past, one that I had turned the page on. And while I knew they would never understand the strength it had taken to get here, I didn't care. The truth was, The best revenge wasn't about making them pay or watching them suffer. It was about succeeding despite them, about thriving in ways they never expected. That was my victory, and no one could take that away from me. I smiled to myself, stepping out of the house and into the future. The best was yet to come.